For those of you who smoke the competition, Wendy's is rewarding you with weekly prizes that will have you winning. Download the Wendy's app and score yourself 150 bonus reward points on your first order and grab a sweet victory from the mouth-watering jaws of defeat along with some fresh, never frozen beef. Sign up to play Daily Face-Off Survivor Pool game to win weekly prizes like the spicy chicken sandwich from Wendy's and the Wendy's app. I forgot to play this week, so I have no update on that, but I'll be back. I'll be back next week playing that game that I have yet to win.
Not playing might be the strategy for you to last as long as possible.
That's right. Just recharge. Just take a chance to recharge. Just think about the past games that we've played and what went wrong. It's not my fault. It's the players who aren't playing well enough for me. So I'm just gonna throw that out there. Okay, Jeff Paterson. Let's bring him in. Our man, J-Pat, at the rink. Jeff, how cold are you right now?
I'm all right. I came prepared today. Brought a heavy jacket on top of the hoodie. Cold water, by the way, a splash of cold water, no issue. Whatever that was coming through the screen after your sneeze there, that's a little more of a concern to me. So I kind of feel like I'm in the danger zone here joining you this afternoon.
We call it the splash zone, but don't worry, we're not in studio, so you're okay, Jeff. Jeff, tell me about Canucks practice today. We'll get to the game with the Flyers, but I want to hear about the practice because we all know how the game against the Flyers went. Looked like there was a bit of a bag skate there. Did I see that correctly on Twitter?
There was a skate at the end. I think firm but fair was sort of the tone of this practice. If people thought that Rick Tocchet was going to lose it and 4 days here between games and it was essentially going to be a training camp again, there was none of that. Was there a little bit of skating at the end? Sure. I'm always up for goaltenders having to do the skating drills as well because it just looks funny in all their gear as they labor up and down the ice. But it certainly didn't cross any lines. This wasn't punishment for last night. This was Rick Tocchet with a plan in place. Most of the practice was 5-on-5 today. I have to think that some of Saturday's practice will be devoted to special teams because the power play is becoming more of an issue, and I think that's becoming more apparent every game out for the Vancouver Canucks, and it certainly was against the Philadelphia Flyers. There was a big hit at one point. Nikita Zadorov caught Andrei Kuzmenko, and they both went down in a heap, and that drew a big reaction from the fans, from Kuzmenko. It was just solid contact, and when you're Nikita Zadorov and you're 6'6" and 240 pounds, if you get the better of any player in the NHL, you're probably going to send him flying. And so Kuzmenko got up, trademark smile on his face. Of course, the big news, if we can call it that, was Phil DiGiuseppe back on the left side with JT Miller and Brock Besser. And so, that rotating wheel of wingers continues. And Nils Höglander had certainly he'd earned his opportunity with his play, but kind of quietly here. 1 goal in his last 9, scored the deflection goal in Nashville when Harm was out on the road trip. So he saw that with his own 2 eyes, but Höglander's got a little quiet. The effort level is still there, but they're trying to find somebody that can bring that level of play up on that line, because when I talk about things going quietly, guys, like nobody seems to be talking. Are people listening here when I say it? JT Miller's got 1 goal in his last 8 games. Hasn't scored 1 goal in his last 10 and 2 in his last 16. And so, it can't just be that third line that you rely on all the time. Now, is Phil DiGiuseppe the answer? I would say no. He started the year there. He earned that opportunity with a strong training camp and a preseason. But his last 24 games, guys, 1 goal, and that was an empty netter in Montreal. He hasn't beaten an NHL goaltender since October 27th at home against the St. Louis Blues. So you're not looking for a ton of offense from Phil DiGiuseppe, but at the same time, that's a top 6 role on this hockey club. And so I don't think you can completely ignore that. But I think, for DiGiuseppe to be successful there, it's back to the staples, forecheck, separate guys from the puck, hound pucks, turn them over. I think to opening night, that Brock Besser goal, when that was textbook, when DiGiuseppe got in on the forecheck, stripped the puck, Miller sets up Besser, they need more of that from Phil DiGiuseppe. So, it's kind of back to the future, I guess, with this hockey club, and we'll see if, second time around for PDG works as well as it did in the early going, because, he was a fit there for the first handful of games, but his play has tailed off to the point he's been a healthy scratch 5 times in the last month.
J-Pat, I think a lot of people would have understood shaking up that Miller line and maybe bumping Hglander further down the lineup, but it appeared that he was potentially the extra, potentially makes him in line to be a healthy scratch against Ottawa. Do you think if the coaching staff goes down that route of making Hglander a healthy scratch, Is that justified, or do you think that's a bit harsh?
Yeah, it feels harsh to me. I mean, he's a double-digit goal scorer on a team that, again, some of the primary guys haven't been doing an awful lot offensively. And Höglander, I thought he had played himself to a point where he was out of consideration. And I guess nobody can ever, feel that comfortable. But I thought he had done enough to be a regular. I still find it kind of wild that he can't get a spot on the second unit power play when Pius Suter or Sam Lafferty or Ilya Mikheyev even continue to be fixtures on the second unit. Again, the power play, whether it's the top unit or the second, nobody's having much success these days. But I kind of think that Nils Höglander becomes almost a scapegoat in this case. And again, this team's done so much winning. It was one loss, but a bad loss against Philadelphia. I don't want to see rash changes. Now their options are somewhat limited, but I am surprised that, a guy like Nils Aman, I suppose, can keep his spot in the lineup. They've got lots of guys that can do some penalty killing, but clearly they like him on for that reason. And that seems to be what keeps him in the lineup on a nightly basis right now. But I don't know. I think this team is better with Nils Höglander in the lineup and having opportunities to contribute. If he has to drop a little bit lower, that's fine. But him coming all the way out, yeah, I'm not sure that I totally agree with that move.
Jeff, just your takeaways from last night's game. I feel like there's so many talking points. I don't want to steer you in one direction, so just give us whatever you want about that debacle of a game last night.
Yeah, I mean, the first period was awful hockey. Sat there in the press box with Harm, and I think universally across the board on press row, kind of wish that there could be a do-over after 20 minutes. Just scrub that from the memory banks and try again. And some of that's coming out of the holiday break, I suppose, but both teams are. I mean, the break was essentially the same, and Philly had to fly cross-continent. I mean, the Canucks should have had an advantage. Rick Tocchet liked their practice on that first day back on Wednesday. Had a spirited morning skate. They should have been ready to go. And this is becoming a bit of an issue. You think back to the Minnesota game here earlier in the month when, they won 2-0, but it took them 14 minutes to get a shot on goal. You think of the game in Chicago after the shootout loss in Minnesota, they were being outshot 10-0 by the Blackhawks. And I know it was back-to-back. So these sluggish starts, again, they've found ways to overcome them. It's impossible to argue with the record. They had picked up 9 points in 9 straight games, but it's about reevaluating the standards and trying to play as close as you can to a complete 60 minutes. And they certainly didn't do that against the Flyers. So the start wasn't great. Obviously, those 3 goals in short succession in the second period did them in. For me, though, and you asked me or you didn't want to steer me, I'll jump on the soapbox here and talk about a power play that is 10th in the NHL. And I guess on the surface, if people look and they say, hey, a top 10 power play, really how bad is it? But, it's running at 12% over the last 6 games. That's not good enough. The 2 power play goals in that stretch against San Jose and against Chicago. Well, guess what? There are a lot of better teams in the NHL than the Blackhawks and the Sharks. So the last 6 games, power play hasn't been great. If you go back earlier in the month, the last 15 games, the power play is working at around 14%. You dial it all the way back to the night the Islanders were here when the Canucks scored 3 times in mid-November. Since then, this is a power play that's running at around 16%. So more than half the season, the last 20 games, the power play at 16%. That's not good enough. That's not good enough. It's not good enough on balance, but it's not good enough when you think of the assembled talent that they've got here. So absolutely torch teams in the early going this season. Power play looked unstoppable. It was running up over 30%. Was it going to stay there? Probably not, although the Oilers did last year. And it really has just kind of fallen off a cliff over the last 20 games. And so I'm curious to see. It was all 5-on-5 work at practice, no special teams whatsoever. I have to think that some of Saturday's practice will be devoted to the power play. Sunday's going to be a team day off for them, and then they get back at it on Monday ahead of the Tuesday game against Ottawa. So they've got some time in here. But for me right now, it is about a power play. Like Quinn Hughes has 1 power play point in his last 14 games. How? You guys are smart hockey minds. Make that make sense. He had 15 power play points in the first 22 games of the season. He has 1 in the last 14. Like that, it just boggles my mind. So teams are adapting. Life is about making changes. If other teams are trying to take Quinn Hughes away, you've got an extra player out there on the ice. Like find that extra player, find that extra space, create 2-on-1 opportunities elsewhere and exploit those. But I'm losing sleep right now over the fact that Quinn Hughes has 1 power play point in the last 14 games. That just makes no sense to me whatsoever.
J-Pat, I wanted to ask you just big picture. We're about to turn the calendar over to 2024. When you look back at 2023, It's been a bit of a whirlwind for the Canucks. So many changes. Tocchet, coming in January, the Bo Horvat trade, a surprising deadline where they made the move for Hronek, and of course, leading to this really impressive season so far. What will you remember most about 2023 from a Canucks perspective?
Yeah, I guess you go back to that third week of January when they made the coaching change. Obviously, I'll remember Bruce's final night behind the bench. Never seen anything like that and probably won't ever again. But, that is water under the bridge now. I wasn't necessarily on board with the coaching change at the time when you had Connor Bedard out there. And I know it was going to be a long shot, but I guess in a parallel universe, would have loved to have seen the Canucks up their lottery odds just to see where the balls might have taken them. They elected to go in the complete opposite direction, though, and they felt those 36 games with a new head coach would allow him to put his structure in place so that they could hit the ground running. They got it right. I mean, the proof's in the pudding now. When you look at the record that they've got near the top of the league, 36 games in. And so Rick Tocchet had 36 games at the end of the season. He's had 36 games to this point now. They have 10 outright losses. So, 2023 was the year that structure finally arrived in Vancouver, and it has served the Canucks well. But yeah, it was a year of transition, but so was the year before. And unfortunately for them, the previous attempt, it was kind of like spinning wheels. And it does feel now like they have surrounded their good players with better supporting cast. That third line right now going about as good as any line in hockey. So they've still got a long way to go. And it was interesting, Dave, as I was waiting to join you guys and you were talking about, the month of January and that long 7-game road trip. I think if there's a month where they may struggle to hit 500, look at it February. Like they start to play some of the really good teams in the National Hockey League, and that has been an issue. Like they have feasted on bottom feeders, Edmonton when they were struggling, obviously took care of San Jose in 3 of 4. You look at what's left on their schedule, though, guys. Like they haven't seen the LA Kings. They've played one game against Vegas. They haven't played Boston yet. They haven't played Winnipeg. They haven't seen Detroit having a decent season. Washington's been a bit of a surprise, but they don't give up an awful lot, and they're playing well. They haven't played Arizona yet, and the Arizona Coyotes having a nice year. And, those teams that I mentioned, if you look at the standings, are all in the top 10 defensively in terms of goals against. And when you look at trying to break down Philadelphia last night, when you try to look at breaking down both of the games against Minnesota this month, I mean, they beat the Wild 2-0, but then they only scored 1 goal in Minnesota. They had trouble breaking down the Wild. Vegas came in here, ran their show. They scored 1 goal when it was already 4-0 for the Golden Knights. So, I am curious to see. I think this team knows what's coming, but will they be prepared to pass some of those tests against the really good teams and the stingy teams defensively? Like it's fun to score the goals when it's 8-9-10 against the Sharks and you're lighting up the Oilers 8-1 on opening night. But when you play these grinding games, and Rick Tocchet talked about the need to be comfortable in scoreless games midway through a hockey game, and I'm not sure that the Canucks felt all that comfortable last night against the Philadelphia Flyers. So that's, to me, what I'm excited about. They've set themselves up now. They've positioned themselves beautifully for a second half. I still think this is absolutely a playoff team, but there are going to be tough tests against some of the really good teams in the National Hockey League. The Canucks believe that they're one of them. But let's see how they fare and how do they go about generating offense on those nights where you have to squirm and you've got to fight for every inch of ice that's out there. Because to me, that's something that this team hasn't done a good enough job of on too many nights this season.
All I'm hearing is that my bet with Earth, Frank and I's bet with Earth, we might come out on the losing end of that for 2 straight months. That's all I'm hearing, Jeff.
Well, they've earned the benefit of the doubt. Like last night was a bad game. It was, but they've been a good team at bouncing back. So I'll give them every opportunity. Ottawa plays twice in the Eastern time zone before they have to fly out here for the game on Tuesday. Like there's no excuse. Like the Canucks should be sitting here lying in wait for the Senators. They've already beaten Ottawa once this year. The Senators don't have a ton of goaltending. And so it's kind of perfect scenario for the Canucks to have a bounce back game against an Ottawa team that has played so much less hockey than anybody else, that they've got this crazy second half schedule. And part of that is, a couple of games here between Christmas and New Year's, and then they have to fly across continents. So, they better be better on Tuesday night. It would be hard not to be.
Jeff, quickly here, I just want to get your thoughts on this. Final question here. A lot of conversation right now about trading for a top 6 winger. And I have to be completely honest with you. The longer I watch the third line be the only line to produce and PDG in the top 6, the more I say, go get someone. Like, go get someone. I don't care if it's a big fish. Like, I wrote for all I want for Christmas is go get Elias Lindholm. Whatever it costs, go get Elias Lindholm. Add Elias Lindholm to this team. You're laughing. Your thoughts on adding a winger? Like, is this team going to do this at some point?
Well, Jim Rutherford certainly has history on his side, so I'm not betting against it. And Patrick Allvin has learned from his boss, and he's been as active as anybody, as people know. So, I think the Canucks recognize that they've made their move for a defenseman. They're getting Carson Soucy back here. He was an extra paired with Mark Friedman at practice, so we'll see where that goes in the days ahead. But first look, when he was out here for a full practice, he was basically the seventh defenseman. But I think with that defense core and the goaltending that they've had most nights this year, I think they feel pretty comfortable in that regard. So that, to me, puts the focus squarely on a top six that, has some star power, but also has some glaring weaknesses. And I'm with you. I think now, like, that's where the attention turns, and it's a question of, do you go and get a play driving winger with some scoring chops, or are you really looking for another center so that JT Miller is that play driving winger that, has the scoring potential? And I think that creates some opportunity and some options for the Vancouver Canucks. They don't have to pigeonhole themselves in, finding the best winger available. If you can find a guy that has some versatility, maybe that allows the flexibility to slide JT Miller over to the wing. Whatever the case, like, Elias Pettersson's production has slowed down considerably, and I think part of that is he's been asked to play with different line mates. Kuzmenko's been in and out of the lineup. Sam Lafferty got a chance. Pius Suter. I'd love to find an upgrade there so that Elias Pettersson could establish chemistry and play with regular line mates and guys that can finish more than Kuzmenko has. Now, if they could get, wave the magic wand and get Andrei Kuzmenko of last year back and being that player, that'd be great. But I'm not feeling that. And, again, Elias Pettersson got off to this incredible start, charged out of the gates, and was leading the NHL in scoring. He's not even a point-a-game guy over the last 18 games, though. If you split the 36 games they've played in half, in the most recent 18, he's got 15 points. So, he's close to a point a game, and I'm not panicking about him, but we know that he's capable of so much more, but he can't do it alone. And so, I think if they recognize that this is an opportunity, and I also think really, and Dave, I know you wrote about this recently, the opportunity, I think, is to win the Pacific Division and avoid that 2-3 matchup. That it's not just about, bettering your chances and being as good as you can. The stakes are massive here because that 2-3 matchup in the Pacific Division, like a really good team, I think a team with legitimate Stanley Cup aspirations is going to be out after the first round. And that's just the way it goes in these divisional playoffs. And unfortunately for the Canucks, they may be in that 2-3 spot, and the matchup may not be favorable for them. So they haven't seen the Kings. Let's see what those teams all look like after the trade deadline. But I think if this team is going to maximize its potential and recognize the opportunity in front of it, that it needs an upgrade in that top six without a doubt.
Jeff, great stuff as always. Thanks so much for joining us. Happy New Year. This will be the last time we talk to you for the year 2023, and we will see you next week and next year. I had to make that joke. I'm sorry.
Well, at least you didn't sneeze, so we got that going for us. But hey, it's been fun with you guys throughout this hockey season. It's been a fun hockey season, and we love talking about it and breaking it all down. And so lots of those moments ahead. Happy New Year to you guys and to all your viewers and podcast listeners as well.
Jeff, thanks so much, man. Appreciate it. That was Jeff Paterson. Canucks Conversation with Harmon and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. And if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.